everyone. I'm Ariel. I'm a speech pathologist, and I'm here with
Danielle. I'm an occupational therapist.
And we are your hosts of Waves of Wisdom. Welcome to second episode, which is titled Neurodiversity 101. So today, we're going to be diving into neurodiversity, what that means, how it impacts our roles as therapists, and, in the world abroad, especially in the world of pediatrics. So we appreciate y'all tuning in and hope you are entertained by this, at least a little bit.
I'm definitely entertained.
All right, so neurodiversity. Danielle, this is a new topic for me. I didn't hear a single thing about it in grad school, did you?
Kind of.
A little bit?
Yeah.
And Danielle is also an autism specialist, so she might be, more well-versed and rounded in those specifics. In terms of neurodiversity, which was never even an exact word that was used when I was in graduate school, it was more just treatment strategies with children with autism or with ADHD. That's pretty much the only thing that was ever touched on. And within that realm of treatment, it was a very different treatment style than the one that we have adopted here, which is considered a neurodiversity affirming practice. So neurodiversity in general is just the idea that everyone's brain is different. We all look different. The insides of our bodies also look and function a bit different. So neurodiversity is the specific idea that there are brains that are physiologically different and that function differently. There's a neurotypical, which is what we, see a typical kid that can pay attention, sit without fidgeting, follows directions clearly, those sorts of things. And then there's, people that are outside the realm of that. And what is that classified as? And how do we treat that? Or how do we help these children? So under the realm of neurodiversity would be our diagnosis such as autism, ADHD, OCD, Tourette's, acquired brain injuries, and pretty much any diagnosis that can impact how your brain functions. The big premise with neurodiversity is that does not make your brain any more or less than someone who's neurotypical. It just means that it works differently and that you can have a toolbox of things to help you still succeed and be, the best person and child that you want to be that grows into an efficient adult, which is, usually the goal of our families that come and see us. They just want their children to be able to participate in their community, they could be able to take care of themselves later in life and things like that.
Well, and I think the term typical or neurotypical is becoming harder to define as we dive more into what neurodiversity is, because what is typical? What is that standard? What are we looking for? And it changes for every child, for every diagnosis, so that terminology of neurotypical is starting to be phased out. And we're starting to adopt terminology like neurodiversity affirming, to where everybody is diverse in the way that they process their environment, their learning styles, the world around them. So it's very interesting to see that being adopted by so many more practices, and getting the opportunity to work for one is awesome too.
It is exciting. It's exciting because we're kind of flipping the script. There can be negative stigmas.
Yes.
With once someone gets a label, or your child gets a label of autism or ADHD or any of these, different neurological diagnoses, it can be scary. It can be very scary. You worry about your child. You worry how they're going to be perceived. They also have a big label on them. But for us in the neurodiversity affirming community, the label doesn't matter. You're still, human. We're all human. We all have, similar goals in life to succeed and have functional families and be able to communicate and be happy. That's the goal. Right?
And I think there's always been like a big stigma around a new diagnosis, especially for families feeling like they have to go through a grief process per se of, this is what I expected for my child. And now that we have this diagnosis, it'll never happen. That it's not the case. And I think the more that we dive into how the brain functions and how they process things, we realize that no matter what that child wants to do with their life, whether it be, become an astrophysicist or who knows, it may take them a different route to get there, but it's still highly possible. And those families do not have to go through the process of, oh my God, my child will never, because that's not the case anymore. And that's where we're trying to take away that negative stigma of, those diagnoses.
Right. And on that token, we have so many families that come in with this preconceived idea from whether it's their pediatrician or just their independent research. My child will not be able to walk. They cannot talk. They cannot use a pencil. They cannot read. They cannot or will not be able to do these things. And that is just not true, right? So So that's where we
Yeah.
come in as skilled therapists, and especially coming from, you know, a practice that is really supporting the neurodiverse community. It's possible. It's possible. It may take longer. Like Danielle said, it may look different, but it doesn't take away from the fact that these kids are very capable. And once they have, you know, along with their support of their families and other people in the community, it's a beautiful thing to see them thrive, right? Let's take a look here. So yes, implications. We now have a little area of events so that we can stay on track.
No more iPad.
No more iPad.
Because I may or may not have divulged my password, which has changed. So
don't try to get into our iPad now.
So we are now paper.
We're paper
copy.
So anyway, so in terms of neurodiversity and how that can look for speech, we can talk about speech and OT. These would be things like eye contact. That's a big one, right? Eye contact and, there's a sign or a red flag, which is something that we do not use in neurodiversity affirming languages. It signifies that something is different and wrong when in fact it's just a symptom of a difference. So eye contact being, you know, to where a child can't maintain eye contact, or they quickly look away, or they're focusing on some other part of your body. That could be a difference. It could be anything from echolalia, so repeating the same word over and over, or repeating maybe Gestalt language processors that have certain phrases that they take from their favorite TV shows, or Baby Shark over and over and over. I mean, it could be so many different things, or even sounds that they're repeating, which would be echolalia. Processing, how the processing time to intake information, whether that's sensory information, verbal information, anything like that. And perseveration on topics. That's also a big one that can be common, or hyper focusing on a topic, or even jumping around to different topics. Topic management, if you will, can be a difference, right?
Well, perseveration, not just on topics, but on thought, on phrases, on actions. It becomes pretty repetitive in the action, the thought, and the verbiage. So it's all of those areas for the perseveration.
Right. And so in terms of, you know, your speech and language, those, you know, symptoms that I mentioned can tend to have a negative, again, connotation. In the terms of, I'm going to sneeze. I can't. Don't laugh. Anyway. It went away. So in terms of, you know, eye contact, language output and delays, echolalia, perseveration on topics, those things can, you know, have a stigma of difference and things like that. But here in a neurodiversity affirming practice, it is not our goal to make a child, if they have a difference in eye contact, stare at someone else. Research shows, especially for our autistic community, that trying and being forceful in someone maintaining eye contact can be physically painful for them.
And traumatic.
Traumatic, yes. And a lot of these practices in the past of, you know, trying to force children to change their behaviors or change their eye contact or force them language out of them, it does show, and force feeding, because there's a lot of sensory differences in our neurodiverse population. They may be picky eaters or things like that. Force feeding and things like that can lead to PTSD. It's research proven. So those are things we don't want to be associated with. And, you know, odds are most parents would not want to subject their kids to that either. However, if you haven't been educated on these things and you're in the realm, like I learned in school, yeah, sometimes, you know, you may need to sit a kid and force feed them. I mean, it's just not relevant today. It's not appropriate. It's not appropriate evidence-based practice anymore. So we as a practice are happy that we are educated in these things and able to avoid these traumatic experiences
and
for
I
these
think
children.
Past experience has shown that when you do a practice, or where you're working on a skill that you're forcing the issue, say for example, force feeding, the child learns that in that specific setting, in that specific chair, whatever it is, I'm having to eat. And we're not being able to carry those skills across settings or take it home with them because it's a traumatic situation around feeding. So if they can avoid it at all costs, they're going to.
Right. And it can actually exacerbate the issue.
Yes.
Right. So we went from eating, I have 3 preferred foods of bananas, potato chips, and French fries. And then now I don't feel comfortable eating any of those things. So you can have a regression.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Make the whole thing even more complicated than it was to begin with.
Yeah.
Right. So I think Danielle is going to dive into a little bit of what you might see occupational therapy.
So looking at occupational therapy and our neurodiverse population, a lot of what we get in as the initial intake of this is what I'm seeing in my child and these are the things that I'd like corrected are things that we really just kind of have to ask ourselves why. So some of the things that we'll have parents parents be like, Johnny's stimming, or he's flapping, or he's spinning, or, we're seeing these behaviors of screaming or biting or covering their ears, and they can't go to the bathroom and they can't go into this store, so we have to kind of look at behaviors or acts as a way of the child communicating with us that something's wrong or something is not right in their body or in their environment. And us as sensory therapists, we try to find the ways that can give their body what they're craving, avoid what they're adverse to, and maybe slowly desensitize them to those stimuli. Things like the trampoline, the swing, our scooter boards, while they're all fun, they have a purpose. So we have, our proprioceptive input, our vestibular input, working on the sensory system as a whole, because we would like that child to be able to navigate their environment, no matter what environment they're in a safe and comfortable way, where they're not having these exacerbations of these feelings of helplessness. And that's ultimately what we see with, sometimes the screaming and the covering of the ears. They're protecting themselves from whatever's bothering them. And, we do get a stigma of, Johnny's flapping, and if we're walking around going like this, well, what's wrong with that? There's really nothing that's calming him or her, that's making them feel good in their body, and it's allowing them to interact in their environment in a safe manner. Right. It doesn't bother anyone, it's not harming anyone, so why can't they do it?
And I think that's something, at least I can speak for myself in terms of speech, stimming. That's a term that I've, learned a lot about from luckily being able to work alongside OTs. And we do have a live audience today. Our lead outpatient OT is behind the scenes waving at us, Cameron. So that's what I'm referring to my wonderful OTs. So what is stimming? Because you all taught me all about it and what it can look like. Can you give me some examples and what that keyword stimming would mean to the layperson on the street?
Okay, so stimming is terminology that is used to describe a self-stimulating behavior. So it is things that a person will do or a child will do to stimulate a part of their brain that is naturally helping their body calm and get to that just right state. Whether it's, tapping their nose or flapping their hands or shaking or spinning in circles, it's getting their body to that just right state to be able to receive the information from their environment, process it, and be able to interpret what's going on without being in that fight or flight state of, oh my God, what's happening? So yes, it does have a purpose. And yes, it's okay that your child is showing these outward behaviors. And like I said, sometimes it can be distracting, but as long as the child is able to appropriately interpret the information from their environment and navigate their environment without feeling this is unsafe or this is not the right place for them, it's okay to have those self-stimulating behaviors. Mm-hmm. And that's what the term stimming comes from, is stimulation.
Yeah, makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the key words, and I'm sure you're going to dive into this later when we talk about OT sensory related things to stimming, the word is safety, right? So yes, most of these stimming behaviors, whether it's finger play, whether it's
rubbing,
tapping, playing with my hair, that's not hurting me.
I do it all the time, everyone. If you see it happens all the time.
Take that with what you will. I mean, these are things that aren't bothering anyone else. It may be annoying. I don't know. Some people complain about it when we get their intake. Well, my kid is always clapping, or, they're always snapping their fingers or whatever it is. But there's no safety risk there, right?
So no. And I think what's happened is, we've had this picture of what is normal in society.
Typical,
and
right?
Anything that is outside of that realm or something that can be perceived as different sometimes is interpreted as wrong just because it's different. And that's not the case at all. There's a reason for why it's happening. There's a reason for why a child is perceiving their environment in different manners. And if that is helpful to them to be able to pay attention and focus in school and get in all the information and be able to learn, then that's okay. It's just different. It's not wrong.
I'm just going to tell you right now, I just noticed that my foot has not stopped tapping since I started this because I'm nervous. This is nerve-wracking, right? So that's something that's calming me. And just for the record, we're both have masters in therapy and we still do these little things, right? So even if it's different, it's completely acceptable and it helps us stay regulated.
I accept you.
Yeah, thank you. And believe you me, you don't want to see either of us dysregulated. It's the same thing that happens, with children. I mean, if you're feeling overwhelmed and you get to that point that you can't calm down, that is horrifying as an adult, as a child. child, as a human, that is a bad feeling. So if these little things like you're talking about can help children or adults that are neurodiverse as well, help them regulate, what is the harm, right?
Well, and you think about like just emotions and feelings, and me as an adult, if I'm sad, I cry. If I'm happy, I cry. If I'm anxious, I cry. Like that's just how we get it out. And you have it, sometimes you have children who don't understand their emotions. They don't understand what's going on in their environment and how to process it. So instead of coming out and expressing that emotion in a manner of like crying or laughing or smiling, or they're tapping or they're flapping or they're twirling, and it's helping them process what's going on a day-to-day situation.
Right. So we're also gonna mention, we've mentioned in our last episode about our holistic approach here at Seaside, and just kind of making that a wider scope of why that's important and why we are very fortunate in our practice to be a part of physical therapy, occupational, and speech that are like-minded. We all are, we may not be perfect. We're all growing every day, but we have the baseline of understanding that the neurodiversity affirming approach is right for us, and it's right for our kids that we treat, and it's right for our families. And in that way, we can all approach these children with respect and autonomy. And that's amazing because we still get some referrals from, physicians or comments from families like, I need you to make them stop tapping their foot, or I need you to make them look at me.
Fix it.
Fix it. Yes, fix it. Fix this with our magic therapy wands, which we don't have, by the way.
That'd be kind of cool.
Right. But what else are you thinking in terms of holistic care and this approach to neurodiversity affirming?
So the way that I look at holistic care, and I know that it's for holistic care, people interpret it very differently. But for us, we have a very comprehensive clinic. Like you said, we have PT, OT, speech. We've included other professionals into our mix, different things that we can present to our families when they're in need. But for me, holistic means looking at the body as a whole. So if we're looking at a child who is struggling with certain areas in their lives, we need to kind of be the investigators of, what's happening and how can other things be affecting the physical outcome of this specific task. For example, if we have a child that's having an issue using the toilet or constipated or just not getting the toileting kind of at
wetting.
Yes. We have to look at, okay, now what does it look like when we're eating? What is our nutrition intake? What is our sleeping pattern? What is our stability at home? Like, do we have consistency? Are we going from mom's house to dad's house? Are we, grandma's? Are we all over the place? Are we scared to use the bathroom? Are there sensory components involved? If there are, what are they? And kind of look at all of the components of the child's life, home life, school life, and kind of dive into what's really happening as a whole and see if there's something that we can, I don't want to say like manipulate, but kind of like tweak to see if that one component will allow this child to now be very successful in the task that we're kind of putting forth. And I say this all the time when it comes to like our families that come in here and they're like, my kid's hitting and biting and pinching and they're just got so many behaviors. We don't look at behaviors as something that's bad or wrong. Yes, sometimes they can be, self-harming is obviously dangerous to the child. And we obviously do not want our therapists put in harm's way when it comes to, parents to be put in harm's way when it comes to aggression. But we look at these behaviors as a form of communication that something is happening or something is wrong. And I always tell our families, like, we're not here to modify those behaviors. We're here to manage the environment so that way those behaviors are not prevalent in their life. So we're looking at, instead of changing the child, changing the environment so that those behaviors don't happen.
Right.
Or they're
drastically reduced.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something that, you hit on, like the fixing it. We hear that often. Can you fix this in my child? Can you fix my child not speaking? Can you fix them perseverating on things? And again, there are different communication styles and they're all appropriate communication styles. Each communication style may have room to grow and advance and, go from there, but I'm not fixing it. If your kid is a Gestalt language processor, which I'm sure we'll talk about at a later date, they speak, in chunks of words or phrases, they're still communicating and it's still effective. And that once you kind of decode things, right? But I'm not fixing that. I'm not going to take them from being one communication communication mode. If I have a child that prefers to not speak because of sensory issues, maybe they don't like the vibration of their throat when you're speaking, maybe they don't like the noise that they hear. If they choose to use a speech device, that's completely fine. And we're going to accept that. And that's a whole part of the neurodiversity affirming approach. In terms of speech as well, specifics, a big symptom or sign of neurodiversity would be, oh, my child comes in, they line up all their toys. Okay, well, formerly what, was mentioned to me was, we've got to get out of that. We're going to mix up the toys. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. What is the lining up of the toys doing to anyone? Me now, as a neurodiversity affirming therapist, if they're lining up their toys, I've got no problem with that. I'm going to sit right down with them and start lining them up too. If that's their preferred way of play, that's okay.
Yeah.
What I can do is still make that therapeutic from there. Whether we're working on language of naming cars, naming colors, making environmental sounds, vroom, vroom, woo, woo, whatever it is, I can still get those goals with their form of play.
Yeah.
I don't need to change them. I need to change me and how I'm communicating with this
and
person.
Then looking at it too in a holistic approach is, again, that let's look at being the investigator is, okay, we're lining up our toys. Why are we lining up our toys? Are we lining up our toys because we're struggling to sit upright on the floor when we're playing and we have core strength, weakness that we need to work on? Is it because I like to look at things when they go by my face and I'm visually able to get it closer when I'm laying down on the floor? Are there other things that are factors that are at play that we could potentially work on in this specific setting and work on those goals versus, my child's lining up the toys, they do everything on the floor. Okay, well, let's get down there. And if it's something that we can work on strengthening muscles or work on the idea of visual tracking, then let's get down there. Let's model what it is we'd like to see from what we have and see what happens with the child. Are they able to do that? Are they able to change their position and still actively, happily participate in the activity that makes them feel good? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Then we're going to go ahead and try working on skills in that manner versus, no, Johnny, you have to sit up. You can't be laying down on the floor, because you really can be. I know I like to lay on the floor sometimes.
Too. Very nice feeling, grounding, if you will. Yeah, I think and on the terms of, there's a differentiation between targeting neurological or developmental goals related to how your brain functions versus strength component.
Yes.
Two different things. While you're saying you can modify things for strength, we are in no way saying that it's not okay to line up your
exactly
toys, right? Two different things.
Yes.
We are affirming and saying it is okay if it's not a strength issue.
Yeah.
And
we're just going to play in that manner.
We're just going to play that way, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
That's how you choose to play. If you want to listen to the wheels on the bus over and over and over while we're doing our work, yeah, I might get a little overstimulated, but
or I might join in on your fun and wheels on the bus every time.
But that's their choice. It's the child's choice. It's the person's choice to, have preferences. We all have preferences. So how are my preferences to listen to really loud music in my car to a child not being able to tolerate music in the car different? They're just preferences, and it's okay both ways. And I love what Danielle said about modifying the environment. And that's my big thing I tell parents is, I'm not here to fix your child. I'm here to fix and modify the environment. What's going on around here that's causing, communication breakdowns or maybe fearfulness or pragmatic issues in social situations, breakdowns. What can I fix with everyone else and education-wise? Because sometimes that's all it takes is understanding of where it's coming from, right? Yeah. For example, I had a client that I was working with, and we were over with the light switch on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off. And for me, that's very distracting. But I immediately knew, neurodiversity affirming therapist, he needed something in that moment, right? So what can I do that's going to redirect him to our task of, working on language and language output? And I was actually doing an assessment. What can we do differently? That way you're getting what you need to be able to pay attention to me, right? So we redirected. I tried a few things from my sensory friends, right? And we did some tapping on the table, which he was really into, and it helped him focus, right? So I think another, just in that realm of figuring out little tweaks that you can make to help the child attend better to a task, if that's our goal, right? You can do those things pretty easily.
Well, and I feel like we find that too in our school age kids that are really struggling with those specific things when they're in the classroom and they're trying to learn, and their body's telling them, I need to flick the lights on and off. I need to do something. I need to move. I need to do something. So I know that everyone out there has heard of all of these fidgets. Fidgets actually started for kids that just needed those movement breaks and those little things that are not super distracting to the other children around them, but can still help them regulate and get right back to that just right state in order to, again, perceive the information from their environment and continue to learn. So for me, fidgets are so much fun. And I know sometimes at school it can be distracting, but we will talk about school-based fidgets on another podcast and how to advocate for your child for those things.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we're both just going to touch on a couple strategies for our neurodiverse population to make sure that we're being neurodiversity affirming and that nothing that you are doing is wrong. There's nothing negative about these things. It's different than neurotypical kids, but that's okay. Right. So in terms of speech things is like I already mentioned the toys, like accepting how a child plays. If they only want to play with their T-Rex over and over and over, and if you're wanting to engage them with something else, it is not to take away the T-Rex, because what's going to happen if I take away that T-Rex?
I'm going to be mad and I'm going to scream and I'm going to yell.
Exactly. We're going to have that escalation. Like Danielle talks about the just right stage, like I'm happy right now. I'm content. I'm not like too low, too understimulated. I'm not too overstimulated. But once I take away that preferred toy, the perseverated toy or whatever, the words that in the past people would say, but we would say now preferred toys, it's going to really stress them out. Why would I want to do that? I'm not gonna. So the strategy is to keep the child with their preferred routines, their preferred toys, their preferred mode of communication, and you can integrate new things alongside that. So let's say my little Johnny is playing with his T-Rex and I have a goal, like I just want him to realize I'm there, joint attention, right, and play alongside me. I can get another dinosaur. I get my Stegosaurus out, man, and we can just have a dinosaur party. I don't have to take away his toy and take him to the ball pit and stress him out because I need him to play with me one-on-one. I can integrate with what he's doing. That's a really big strategy, is to find the strengths and the preferences of the child and build alongside them.
And build on the skill, because then you can turn that into another skill, and you've not taken away the item that gives them that comfort and gets them away from the fight or flight, and you're now building on it in order to achieve our therapeutic goals.
Right.
Without causing stress or trauma to the child.
Exactly. And in terms of speech as well, and this is kind of globally, but just specifically for us, is the use of force is, to us, it's not acceptable. Like we mentioned, it does cause trauma. It causes escalation. It causes, distrust, because you lose the trust with that child when you are using force, whether it's force feeding, whether it's force play, when you're putting them in a situation that they don't want to be in. It's not appropriate, not acceptable. So that is a strategy to avoid, right? Yeah. Any sort of force or extra attention drawn to a task. Like I say this over and over to our speech team, we're modeling without expectation. So if you're wanting your child to, start saying core words, or whether it's I want or help me or things like that, I'm going to say that. We're going to pretend Danielle's mommy, right? Or your baby, and you're not saying anything, but I'm going to say, oh, I see that you're crying. I'm going to acknowledge what's going on. And then I'm going to say, wow, maybe you want some water because you can't reach it. Do you want help? You want help, right? And you see, she modeled it back. But the thing is, without expectation, had she not modeled it back, or the child doesn't, you still give them what they want. We're not withholding. That's another thing. There's no force. There's no withholding of things, because that's traumatic, right? And especially something like food and water. I mean, it's global, but those are your innate needs. Like I'm not going to sit here and hold your bottle of milk until you tell me milk. Like that's not appropriate. It's going to cause more stress, and it's going to make the child not want to communicate and to kind of turtle, if you will.
And not trust you.
Exactly.
And not want to kind of engage with you. And it makes it very challenging for you to get anything accomplished with that child if they don't trust you.
Exactly. So those are some speech specific things. I think Danielle's going to talk about OT, but one more, just kind of a couple goodies we have out, right? We have some sensory things, and some things that are related to speech is I have, and this is OT as well, but things that we might notice in speech related to oral motor would be if we have kids that are biting their, their cheek or their lip because they either want stimulation or they're nervous or whatever it is. That is something that's harmful in our world of speech. So we try to alternate with things like chewies. So this is a silicone medical grade that can't be chewed. It can't be, I mean, maybe if you like sawed it, you could saw it in half, but teeth, they're not going to do anything. You can wear it as a necklace, so that way they have it. If they're feeling nervous, they can pick it up, chew, chew, chew. It's also oral motor appropriate. It's not going to damage their teeth. It's going to be something they can work on, you know, different.
And they
oral
come
motor
in all different types.
Yes.
So that way they're not distracting or, you know.
And even you see me doing it with my hand, it could even be a fidget, right?
Well, because that one's kind of textury. So
Textury, yeah. And then another thing, you know, Danielle, again, we'll talk more about this, but we use a lot for oral motor is like Freddie the Frog, and he's little vibrating input, right? Like if they're wanting to tap or scratch or something, maybe the vibration would help instead. And this is where, you know, speech and OT work together to figure out those things. But this is just to show you that there are tools in the world of speech that can help with these specific, you know, maybe struggles or differences that we're having.
Yeah. And in the world of OT, when we looking at like a sensory component, we kind of break it down into sensory seeking or sensory avoiding.
Right.
So we have children who are going to completely avoid touching things that are wet or sticky or say feathers or whatever it is, the stimuli.
Question.
Yes.
Is this much, before you like talk about each thing, is this much more prevalent in our neurodiverse community?
Yes.
So whether they are sensory seeking or avoidant is more prevalent that you're saying in our neurodiverse community.
And so this is where we're kind of looking at our children who are stimming, those self-stimulating behaviors. A lot of that is because I'm put into a situation where either I'm avoiding the stimuli or I am seeking the stimuli.
Right.
So for us, as in therapeutic interventions, we're going to look at, are we avoiding, are we seeking? And then what is it we're avoiding and what is it we're seeking?
Right.
So we can find different tasks that are not necessarily sticking your hand in a bucket of whatever it is that you don't like, that will help give your body the input that it's craving. So I say this all the time, like we use the swing and the trampoline and the ball pit. And while that is so much fun and kids love it because bright and colorful, it does have a purpose. So if we're looking at a child, you know, talking about just right state, who is, like you said, low arousal, not really engaging, avoiding everything, and we sit them on the swing that they're tolerating, now we can thin them and kind of get them to raise their arousal and then get to that just right state in order to process their environment without hiding or covering their ears or, you know, pushing things off to the side. We've now given them another outlet for those feelings that their body is craving or avoiding. So for us, like I said, we use those things like the trampoline, we use the swing, we have ball pit, scooter boards, different things like that will give them the input that their body's seeking to get them to that just right state. Same thing with our friendly fidgets. We were talking about our friend on the floor who's lining up their toys because we're visually inspecting what's going on, or that's just the way we like to play. And we also have little things like this that can be very visually calming and can help us get to that just right state. We have things that are loud and noisy, and you just blinked on that one. But we have things that feel wet and sticky. But don't actually get your hands wet and sticky. So this is easier to tolerate than, say, sticking your hand in a bunch of Orbeez and you pull it out and or paints, you've got stuff all over your hands. So it's working on desensitizing to those specific stimuli in a manner that is not threatening and is not causing that trauma or causing that fight or flight reaction, because they still trust us.
Right.
They know we're not going to put them in a manner that's going to,
be forceful?
No. Forceful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a lot to be said about, in the world of therapy in general, how much we kind of blend into each other, and having this neurodiversity affirming practice of, you know, we listen to each other, we know we want what's best for the child to keep them calm and regulated. Communication wise as well, you have to be regulated. You have to be at that just right state before you communicate.
Yeah.
If I'm trying to fall asleep or I'm not involved, I'm not talking to you. I'm not listening. I'm not involved. If I'm really anxious and I'm looking around, I'm just really freaked out, I mean, I'm also not
involved.
Right? So I have to get to that state, that regulated state, to be able to successfully communicate. So that's one of the big things for, you know, communication and speech wise. And we work hand in hand with OT, and I'm sure PT uses the same strategies that, you know, y'all are able to teach as far as regulation. Because if your child is not regulated, you're not going to get anywhere. You cannot give them a task and expect them to complete it, whether it's language, whether it's eating something, whether it's taking a bath, it's not going to happen. Or successfully without trauma, it's not going to happen.
Or safety, because like you're speaking, I won't speak for our PT friends, but we are a comprehensive clinic, so we do work hand in hand with our
Probably
PT.
get to meet them at some point. They're wonderful.
One of these days. If we're looking at a child being in the just right state and we have someone who's dysregulated or heightened arousal, not able to attend, are we accessing our physical therapy equipment appropriately? No, we're probably jumping, or we're not being safe, or we have no awareness of what's going on in our environment that could potentially harm us.
Right.
So that's why, at least from a PT perspective, from the PTs we've worked with, being in that just right state is very important for them, because they are working with children on this equipment that could potentially, we work on balance and core strength and all of that. And sometimes our little friends don't have a lot of balance and they might fall, but we got to make sure that they're safe.
Right. And I think it sounds like we should do a whole separate podcast on behavior management and, in the neurodiversity affirming way and how this all incorporates. So stay tuned.
I think you can see how our minds tend to swirl neurodiversively.
So there's just so many levels to this, and into the neurodiversity realm, this is, supposed to be just a quick overview, which you might have been a little...
I think we're long-winded.
But we're giving you that.
Sorry, friends.
It's taken us years to gather this information, so if you can learn from it in a shorter amount of time, hey, more power to you, because this is something we're still learning about every day, and it's exciting to know that we're doing things in a positive way, because I can look back at what I was doing 7 years ago as a therapist and be cringy,
I know. When we talk about forceful, I remember I was very forceful in the beginning, and it got me nowhere. And
that's what we were taught, because, the old research was showing that, and you're demonstrating that to parents, and you're just creating more issues. So there's a lot more that's going into this, whole realm of neurodiversity, and we're going to be diving more into it. But in terms of educating parents, I think it is critical that all clinicians and parents should be having that, working relationship and trustful relationship with each other, that, the parents are able to tell you what's going on, but you're also able to tell a family that just got a new diagnosis of ADHD or autism that it's okay. I know it's going to be hard. Yeah. There are going to be challenges, but your child is wonderful. They're capable. They're going to do great things, and they have a great supportive family. But getting the parents on the same page of, this isn't a catastrophe, We have to understand that these are humans. Anyone that has a neurodiverse brain is still human. We all have the same goals, like I mentioned before. We just want to be happy and have a pleasing life. As long as that's safe for everyone, there's nothing that can't be modified.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
To the benefit of the child.
Nothing that they can accomplish too.
And having parents kind of do their own education into this realm of neurodiversity is very important, because we say this often in all of the therapeutic tasks. I mean, having 1 or 2 hours a week with the child is great for us if we can get them to attend and do certain strategies here with us and it helps the child, great. But if it's not carried over at home or in school or with a friendly play date or whatever it is, what's the point? So we have to make sure that we are, which is the point of this podcast, right? That we are reaching out to everyone as a whole. And it's not just, in the therapist world of what we're doing. It's for everyone. This information is for everyone, and we should all be using it.
Well, and I think too, a lot of the point of this podcast is to try to reach as many people as possible. And I know for us, we build strong relationships with our families because we enjoy that open communication, that honest communication, the non-judgmental approach to, if you have a problem, come talk to us. If it's something that we can help you with, if it's something that we can educate you on, then of course, that's what we're here for. And I'd like to extend that to our audience as well. So I know that we tend to have a lot in our heads when we're trying to discuss this, and we try to stick to a script for the most part, not really a script, but like
ideas,
but we tend to go off topic, and we're really passionate about what we do. But if anyone out there feels like you kind of missed something, or you have a specific question, or you just want a little bit more information, please feel free to reach out. I think below we'll put some links. Feel free to leave a comment, or there will be a link to the Seaside Therapy Instagram Instagram. And, please feel that you're safe in asking whatever questions you would like. And we're here to just help and spread knowledge. And if we don't know it, we'll ask around till we figure it out.
We've got some connections that we're very grateful for. So we're all constantly learning. And that's one of our big goals here at Seaside, and just as personally and professionally, is to keep growing, right? So we want to share all this information as best we can. It is a lot of information, so please feel free to reach out to us. We do have a book that we really like, a little resource that we've kind of all started our neurodiversity journey here at Seaside. I don't have it on hand now. We'll list it, and I'm sure we're actually referring to it in the first podcast. It's wonderful. It can be shared with teachers. It can be shared with family members. It's very easy to read. It hits the topics and even goes deeper. So I will make sure to provide that as a resource, and I'm sure we'll be referring to it in the future as well. But like Danielle said, you can reach out to us at Seaside Therapy FL on Instagram. And I do have a personal, speech page. It's churchill.changes on Instagram if you're interested in reaching out to me specifically. So we look forward to getting any questions. We'll be sure to address them at the beginning of the next podcast. There's a lot of incoming podcasts coming your way. So we've got some collaborations, again, with some dentists and GI, ENTs.
We have some amazing merch.
Yes, we do have some merch that you can also check out if you're interested in supporting Seaside and our Waves of Wisdom, merchandise here. It's exciting stuff. So again, thank you so much for listening to us and tuning in. We really appreciate it.
Can I say my line now?
Yeah, I think Danielle has
like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. And we appreciate you all and wish you the loveliest time. And this was very important. I should have said at the very beginning. So here we go. Happy Autism Acceptance Month and happy Occupational Therapy Month to my dear friend Danielle. We are wishing all of our OTs globally the best month and hope you're celebrated. And our autistic community, we love and accept you. And we even have an Autism Acceptance Seaside shirt. We should have been wearing.
We should have wore it.
We'll link that too. But all these exciting things, we thank you so much, and bye.
Take home Seaside vibes. Shop our Seaside Therapy merch now. Make a splash in your well-being and ride the tide of neurodiversity to a healthier, happier life. Subscribe today and surf the wisdom wave. Let's support inclusivity together.